So this week there's a funeral, and after the funeral there's a funeral kind of luncheon. And at the luncheon I sat at this table where there's two guys from St. Mark's. And I knew them from St. Mark's, and one of the guys, he kind of cracks me up because years ago he had 3 teenage sons, and one of his sons was humorously very obnoxious. This sounds kind of strange. I looked forward to his obnoxiousness because he would do things just to drive his dad up a wall. And his dad, very good person, but kind of, very buttoned down. He did a lot of things, but one of my favorites is he showed up to Mass one Sunday, and he had shaved his head except for this huge purple mohawk. And so... just sitting out in the assembly, wow, you could see that one. And so I asked his dad, I said, well, what's up with that? And his dad says, I can't fight everything. So my position is, as long as he gets good grades and doesn't do drugs, I'm not going to fight this. So now years later, I'm at the table after this funeral, and I'm just kind of curious how his sons turned out, especially the wild one. And I said, so how is he? He said, oh, he's doing great. He's married and he has a kid. And I said, well, has he settled down at all? And he says, yeah, if anything, he's become too conservative, which kind of cracks me up. And the thing about it is you can be as brash as you want when you're a teenager. But suddenly when you're married and you're holding a life in your hands, life itself gets very serious. And what I like about the father and these crazy things the son would do is that the father didn't really fight it. He didn't like it, but he didn't fight it. As long as you aren't doing drugs and get good grades, you do it. And I like the fact that the father meets his son where his son is at and waits until his son can meet his father where he's at. And in a way, that reminds me of today's gospel. That there is kind of this meeting at where the Father going to where he can meet us, or Christ going where he can meet us. And if you're wondering, I want to explain the gospel, but I have to tear apart the symbols because it's all symbols. And the first symbol is baptism. When on Sunday, it's always Sunday, Jesus appears on Sunday, and they always have trouble recognize the presence of Christ, but they recognize Christ. He's not a beachcomber, it's Christ. And so Peter puts on clothes and jumps in the water. That's a symbol of baptism, water, and you get new clothes. And the second symbol is actually confirmation. And the confirmation is this net, which is the gospel of love, in Peter's boat, symbolizes the church, takes this net and pulls in 153 fish, different kinds of fish. Now, the reason why it says that is they believed at the time period that there was 153 different nations, 153 different types of people. Also, in the book of Genesis, the name Yahweh, God, is mentioned 153 times. And what it means is this, the church is going to be filled with a lot of people who are all different, people of every personality and shade. They're going to be part of the church, and we welcome them. Together, they reflect the true name of God. And so you have to be able to welcome other people and their uniqueness. And this is Brené Brown, who's just this great sociologist. She mentions that when you go into communities, and look for this, when you go into communities, you can tell whether it's a community that believes in belonging or fitting in. And if it's a community of belonging, then, this community loves you for who you are, and even your craziness, even the purple hair, it loves you. Communities of fitting in means we will love you when you behave this way, and you have to be like us. That's actually a form of coercion. That's not really love. And I hope Holy Apostles is really this community of belonging where people feel loved for who they are, even their brokenness. And so Peter, symbolized the head of the church, he draws all these people in. So that's confirmation, but also what it means to be church. And then the third one is the Eucharist. And that is the symbol of the fish and loaves. In the Gospel of John, there's 2 fish and loaves. One before death and resurrection, then after. The first one symbolizes the unity of everyone. And then after the fish and loaves, Jesus says, I am the bread, living bread that came down from heaven. When he's resurrected on Sunday, on this third Sunday, he appears again. And once again, there's fish and loaves. Except this time, if you share in the fish and loaves, the Eucharist, what you're really being fed is resurrected life. And you also have this charcoal fire. That's a big symbol too. If you notice, there's 2 charcoal fires, one at his death and one at his resurrection. At the one of his death, that charcoal fire was death. There's where Peter denied Christ 3 times. At this charcoal fire, Peter is going to make 3 vows of love. The fire is now about life and love. And so you have these 2 fires. And when Jesus says, Peter, do you love me? This is really great theology, but you have to know a little Greek. In Greek, there's 4 words for love. Unfortunately, in English, we have 1, love. There's love of one's family. There's love of one's friends. That's philia, like the city Philadelphia. It's named City of Brotherly Love. That's love of friends. There's romantic love. Romantic love right there. They fell asleep already. But romantic love, that's eros. And the highest form is called agape love. Agape love is unconditional love. But there's this trick with unconditional love. It demands sacrifice. It's a scary one, where you'll offer your life in sacrifice. That's unconditional love. So when Jesus asked Peter, do you love me, agape? Peter replies back, yes, Lord, you know that I love you, philia, like a brother. And so Jesus tries again and says, Peter, do you love me, agape? And Peter can't say agape. He can't really vow to that. And why can't Peter vow to that? Because if you remember, before the crucifixion, Jesus says, I'm going to go to Jerusalem and die. And Peter, in his brashness, says, I'm going to go and die with you. It's really easy to say things until it comes time to pay for it. And Peter, of course, if you know, he got scared and ran away. So all the apostles. He can't really make the sacrifice. So in the resurrection, when Jesus keeps asking, do you love me, agape? Peter now is very humble. He's not the brash, obnoxious one. He really is very humble and he's honest. He knows he's not capable of that much sacrifice. So he doesn't say agape. He replies a second time, you know I love you like a brother. So Jesus, he goes lower. Jesus a third time asks, do you love me like a brother? So Jesus lowers it. And you can say, why would Jesus do that? Think about the Father, who the Son is very brash. So the Father will meet the Son where he's at. He's not really capable of it yet. So Jesus lowers the standards and says, do you love me like a brother? And Peter says, you know all things, meaning you know I'm not capable of unconditional love. And Jesus then replies, basically, that last line, he basically replies, not yet. In your youth, you do whatever you wanted. But when you become an old man, another will tie your hands and take you where you do not want to go. And that was to indicate that, yes, Peter will die committing agape. Peter is not there now, but Peter will eventually be able to really sacrifice his life, Peter will be able to commit unconditional love. And the point is this: whatever love we have in our life, whether it's eros or love of our family or love of our friends, what we're hoping is that Christ will call us to constantly come back again and again and again, calling us to really unconditional love, take us just from here to way up here. He will meet us where we're at, but hoping that by the end of our lives, we are capable of unconditional love. And how this relates to the Eucharist is that, notice, at the Eucharist, Christ is constantly calling us to a higher love. We may not be capable of it right now, but hopefully after a lifetime of really feeding on the life and the presence of Christ, what it results is a life poured out in unconditional love. And so there is this idea in the Eucharist that when you receive communion, you are actually making a vow to God. And the vow is to love. We may not be capable of it, but hopefully over a lifetime, we can eventually say we are capable of unconditional love. And so usually at this time during Easter, everybody renews the 3 baptismal promises. I want to get a little hippy-dippy. I usually hate this stuff, but I'm going to skip the baptismal promises, and how about this? I'm going to ask you the 3 questions that Jesus asked Peter. And all you have to do, like a wedding, is say, I do. So please stand. So I ask you, do you love me unconditionally?
I do.
Feed my lambs. Do you love me unconditionally?
I do.
Tend my sheep. Do you love me like a brother?
I do.
Feed my sheep. Knowing that Christ is here among us, let us offer our prayers for the needs of the world.